Welcome to the deep dive. Today we have a pretty wild mission. We are decoding a mind-bending, honestly almost rebellious philosophical text by an author named Feng.
Right, yeah. The essay is titled, Supreme Buddhist Dharma Has No Self and No Sutra. And it really is a fascinating piece of writing.
It is. But to start this off, I want you to imagine something for a second.
Right.
Imagine you decide to dedicate your entire life to mastering a specific discipline.
Oh, like dedicating decades to studying a founder's teachings.
Exactly. You study it every single day. You memorize the rule book, cover to cover. You follow every single guideline to the letter.
Yeah, and you think you're finally reaching the ultimate test to become a grandmaster.
Right. Only to discover that the final requirement is to take that beloved rule book, rip it to shreds, and throw it in a fire and completely denounce the founder while you're at it.
Which, creates this intense psychological friction. We are so conditioned to view mastery as just flawless adherence to the rules.
Yeah, we really are. It's baked into us.
So the idea that true spiritual or intellectual perfection demands the total destruction of your foundation is just, well, it feels counterintuitive. To a devout practitioner, it probably sounds entirely offensive.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we're talking about a text that argues the absolute highest level of spiritual mastery requires you to literally smash the teachings.
Right.
And Feng didn't just write this in a vacuum, right? He wrote it as a direct response to a critic.
He did, yeah. We really need to look at the specific context here.
Yeah.
There was a monk who Feng refers to as a slope owner, or someone acting like they can train masters.
Right, like a self-appointed guru.
Exactly. And this monk publicly criticized Feng. He claimed that Feng had a fundamental flaw in his understanding of Buddhism.
Oh, wow. What was the flaw?
Well, specifically, the monk stated Feng didn't understand the concept of self, and that he completely failed to comprehend the sutras.
And the sutras being the canonical scriptures, the holy texts.
Yes, exactly, the core rule books.
So Feng's response is just dripping with sarcasm. He doesn't write a standard defensive rebuttal at all.
Not even close. He essentially leans right into the insult.
Yeah, he says something to the effect of, oh, please, merciful monk, train me into a master.
Right. I'm just newly entering crazy Zen. I don't know the immensity of heaven and earth.
It's so passive-aggressive. But that term, crazy Zen, that's doing a lot of heavy lifting there, isn't it?
It really is. He is referencing a specific tradition within Zen Buddhism that famously values spontaneous, unconventional, and sometimes just shocking behavior.
Like over-rigid textbook learning.
Exactly. So he sets the stage by playing the fool, but then he just proceeds to drop a totally paradigm-shifting explanation of what the doctrine actually is.
Right. He builds his whole counter-argument on this one core, unshakable foundation. He says the true thinking of the Buddha is entirely formless.
Yes. Formless.
Which, sounds highly abstract. What does formless actually look like in practice?
Well, it means it has absolutely no physical form, no mind form, and no dharma form.
And dharma, in this context, that translates to the law, right? Or the teachings.
Yeah, the law, the teachings, the rigid rules. Feng is arguing that true enlightened thinking is completely integrated with the universe. It's totally unmoved by tangible characteristics.
Okay.
It just cannot be boxed in by a rigid set of doctrines.
I understand the theory, but as human beings, our entire cognitive framework relies on forms.
Wow, absolutely.
We categorize the world just to survive. We build rules. We assign identities. We rely on physical texts to tell us how to behave.
Yeah, we need the structure.
So Feng counters this human tendency by turning to one of the most historically significant texts in Mahayana Buddhism.
Or Diamond Sutra.
Exactly. Mahayana Buddhism is a tradition focused heavily on compassion and the path of the bodhisattva, or, the enlightened being. And he uses the Diamond Sutra itself to dismantle the very idea of religious structure.
Which is brilliant. He points out that if you actually read the Buddha's words in the Diamond Sutra, the core message is a revelation of this supreme, formless thinking.
But the Buddha conveys this through glaring paradoxes, doesn't he?
He does. The text seems to completely contradict itself on the surface. And that's exactly what Feng uses to trap his critic.
The contradictions are just massive. Like, according to the text, the Buddha says his ultimate goal is to save infinite, countless, boundless sentient beings.
Right, to help all of them achieve ultimate liberation from suffering.
But then, in the very next breath, The Buddhist states that in reality, absolutely no sentient beings are actually saved.
It sounds completely absurd if you take it literally.
Right, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Wait, it's like a doctor walking into a hospital claiming they just cured 1 million patients of a deadly disease, but then immediately turning around and saying, by the way, patients don't actually exist.
That's a great analogy.
Like, how do we make sense of that? If we take that literally, it's just nonsense.
The resolution to that nonsense lies in how we define a form.
Listen, okay, lay it on me.
In this philosophy, a form isn't merely a physical shape. It's a psychological construct. It's a rigid definition, or like an ego-driven identity.
So it's not just about a physical object.
No. The text specifically lists the form of self, the form of a person, the form of a sentient being, and the form of a lifespan. Suefeng explains that a true bodhisattva, an awakened being acting for the benefit of others, just cannot hold on to any of these rigid definitions.
Oh, okay. So if you are clinging to the identity of being a savior, that means you require someone to be a victim or a patient in order for your identity to exist.
Yeah.
So you're stuck in forms.
You've isolated the exact mechanism there. If you hold on to the concept of a sentient being that needs your help, you create a boundary. You manufacture a separation between yourself and the rest of the universe.
Wow.
The Buddha teaches that true giving, or true charity, cannot rely on dwelling on anything tangible. You shouldn't dwell on sound, smell, taste, touch, or even the rules of Dharma itself when you're practicing compassion.
So your mind can't stagnate on any physical matter or sensory experience.
Exactly. If someone operating as a bodhisattva still possesses an ego, like a self phase or a people phase, they are not actually a bodhisattva.
So going back to the doctor analogy, the doctor cures 1 million people, but does the action without ever internalizing the label of healer.
Right.
And they never label the people as diseased. They just perform the action without dwelling on the categories at all.
That's exactly it. They just do it. But Zofeng takes this a step further, leaning into what really feels like a direct attack on the religious establishment.
Oh, yeah. He brings up a paradox from the source material that basically criminalizes quoting the founder.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how Zhuofeng highlights the Buddha's own words regarding his teachings.
It's the ultimate slander.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Buddha explicitly states that if anyone claims he spoke the Dharma, meaning he handed down a specific, tangible, rigid set of teachings, that person is actually slandering the Buddha.
That is wild.
They are completely misrepresenting his entire existence. The Buddha achieved supreme enlightenment precisely because he obtained absolutely zero Dharma.
Wait, okay. If the text says that the Buddha obtained 0 Dharma, I'm stuck again. Does that mean the Buddha was just like a charismatic guy who actually knew nothing? Did he just sit under a tree and discover a void?
Well, not nothing, but nothing tangible. He didn't acquire a secret magical rulebook.
Okay.
The moment you say, this specific rule is the absolute truth, you have created a new form. You've built a box. The truth is infinite, so by definition, it cannot fit inside a box.
That makes sense.
The law is not a physical reality you can hold, but it's also not entirely empty. It doesn't extinguish into total nothingness. It's a state of possessing a pure mind that dwells nowhere.
Dwells nowhere.
Right. The text states that the Buddha didn't come from anywhere, and he isn't going anywhere. Seeking the Buddha through tangible forms or trying to find enlightenment through a rigid set of rules is actively described as an evil path.
An evil path. Okay, so if seeking the truth through rules is an evil path, and the founder never actually spoke a rigid doctrine, where does this leave the monks and scholars?
That is the big question.
Right, like if the sutras aren't the Dharma, and no great monk has ever actually spoken the Dharma, why do these books exist? Why are we reading them? Why did the Buddha bother opening his mouth at all, if words are just forms that trap us?
Zhuofeng addresses that exact tension using a very famous, very profound analogy. He argues that the sutras, the ancient texts, the great monks, all of these structured religious elements are simply a raft for crossing the river.
A raft.
Yes, they're strictly utilitarian tools.
Let's visualize the mechanics of that raft. You're standing on one side of a raging river, which represents human ignorance or, suffering.
Right, the river of life and death.
And you desperately need to get to the other shore, which represents enlightenment or this formless truth. So you build a raft out of words, concepts, rules, and rituals.
You use the sutras to build it.
Exactly. You use it to survive the treacherous water. But once you actually reach the other shore, your relationship with the raft has to change.
The utility of the vehicle is exhausted the moment you hit dry land. You leave the raft on the beach.
You definitely don't pick up a heavy, waterlogged wooden raft, strap it to your back, and carry it through the forest for the rest of your life.
No, of course not.
That would just weigh you down and prevent you from exploring the new shore.
Yet, that is precisely what Shufeng accuses religious scholars of doing.
Oh, wow.
When they cling to the literal words of the sutras, they are dragging a wet raft across dry land. The teachings are not the truth itself. They are just the vehicle designed to point your mind toward the truth. Once you arrive, the vehicle must become obsolete.
And he brings in a second analogy to really emphasize how useless it is to cling to the words. He says that trying to consciously seek the Dharma, trying to grasp it as a tangible object, is like a person trying to catch the moon's reflection in the water.
It perfectly illustrates the illusion of possession. You see this brilliant, glowing truth in the water.
Yeah.
But if you reach in and try to grab it, you just splash around frantically, catching nothing but bubbles. The moon isn't in the water.
The sutras are just the water reflecting the light.
Exactly. They reflect the truth. But if you try to hold the words in your hand and declare, I possess the ultimate truth, you're just standing there with wet hands, completely missing the actual moon up in the sky.
Okay, so having established this incredibly abstract philosophy, how do people actually live this out? Because we have everyday believers, we have scholars, and we have monks all interacting with this water in different ways.
Right.
And Shifeng gets highly practical here. He categorizes how people practice this into 4 distinct levels, or vehicles. This really feels like his direct diagnosis of the critic who attacked him.
Oh, absolutely.
So the baseline level he describes is the small vehicle. What's that?
The small vehicle practitioners are defined as those who have a self, who have forms, and who have sutras.
Okay, so these are the everyday believers, the people burning incense, bowing in temples, reciting the scriptures line by line, and praying for specific physical outcomes.
Yeah.
They rely entirely on the forms of the religion. They really need the statues and the rituals just to feel connected.
Yes. And then moving one level up, we find the middle vehicle.
Right. Who are they?
These are the practitioners who explain the self, who explain the forms, and who explain the sutras.
Ah. So these are the academics, the scholars, the teachers. This is likely where Shuifeng thinks his critic sits.
Definitely.
But why is this level still considered inferior? I mean, they understand the texts better than anyone else.
Because intellect creates the most sophisticated traps. The scholars understand the mechanics of the raft perfectly. They can diagram the raft, they can debate the historical context of the raft, but they are still obsessed with the raft itself.
They're analyzing the water instead of looking at the moon.
Exactly. The sunk cost fallacy is massive here. If you spend 30 years studying the rules, your entire ego becomes tied to your identity as a master of the rules.
Which brings us to the supreme vehicle. Shuifeng describes these practitioners as having no self, no form, and no sutras.
These individuals focus purely on Zen and the actual pursuit of formless enlightenment. They have successfully let go of the rigid rules. They recognize that the raft was just a tool, and they've left it behind on the shore.
Now, you would naturally assume this is the pinnacle. I mean, supreme is literally in the name.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Shuifeng adds a 4th level. He calls it the highest supreme vehicle.
Yeah, this is the curveball.
He says this final tier consists of the people who stand on the other shore and actively smash the Buddha and smash the sutras. He literally writes that they are the ones who scold or curse the Buddha and the scriptures.
It is a staggering claim to make within a religious framework. He is asserting that the absolute highest pinnacle of understanding, the ultimate spiritual achievement, is to destroy the very idols and texts that are universally revered by everyone in the lower 3 vehicles.
I'm just trying to process the level of disrespect that implies. Imagine walking up to a devoted follower and telling them the greatest master is the one actively vandalizing the holy books.
It would not go over well.
Not at all. It completely flips the script on what devotion even means. But, if we track the logic of the raft and the moon, it holds up.
It does.
If the ultimate truth is truly formless, then any lingering reverence for the form of the Buddha or the physical form of the book is just a barrier. You almost have to destroy the idol to prove you understand what the idol was pointing at.
That is the ultimate mechanism of liberation he's describing. Total detachment. However, Shuifeng anticipates how dangerous this concept is, and he immediately follows it up with a massive, unequivocal warning label.
Yes, before anyone goes out and starts throwing away their books and mocking traditions, we have to highlight this severe warning.
It's crucial.
He states that ordinary people must absolutely never scold the Buddha or the sutras. If an ordinary person attempts to smash the teachings, Shuifeng warns that it is a grave sin, and they will be eternally doomed or like fall into an abyss of no return.
This raises an important question regarding the double standard, doesn't it?
Uh,
Why is smashing the sutras the ultimate enlightenment for one person, but a ticket to eternal doom for another?
right. What's the difference?
The difference lies entirely in the psychological state of the practitioner. Swesving specifically notes that the people who curse the Buddha and the sutras must be true, attained ones, who have fully mastered the Dharma. They must be firmly standing on the other shore.
You know, it's exactly like a master jazz musician breaking every single rule of music theory.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you listen to a jazz legend and they are playing notes that technically clash. They are completely ignoring the rigid rules of classical composition, but they can do it and it becomes high art because they mastered the theory first.
Yes.
They know the rules inside and out, which gives them the right to transcend them. If I just sit down and bang my fists on a piano, having never practiced a scale in my life, that's not breaking the rules to create art. That's just noise.
The jazz analogy works perfectly because you're highlighting the difference between transcendence and ignorance.
Hmm.
An ignorant person breaks the rules because they simply don't know them. A master breaks the rules because they clearly see the limitations of those rules.
Right.
The ordinary person is still standing on the first shore, or perhaps they're struggling halfway across the river. If they decide to smash the raft while they are still in the water, they're going to drown.
That's a grim image, but very true.
They desperately need the structure. They need the forms, the morality, and the guidance of the sutras to help them overcome their base instincts.
You have to earn the right to burn the rulebook. If you try to jump straight to the highest supreme vehicle without doing the grueling work of the smaller vehicles, you aren't enlightened. You are just a person with no raft, drowning in a river, shouting that water isn't real.
Exactly. Smashing the rules out of arrogance or rebellion without having achieved that formless understanding just leads to destructive nihilism.
Precisely. And just when you think you have a handle on this complex, deeply nuanced framework of Buddhist philosophy, Feng drops a massive philosophical twist right at the very end.
Yeah, he completely shifts the paradigm at the end of his essay.
It's quite the plot twist. After spending the entire article painstakingly dissecting the Diamond Sutra, analyzing the Buddha's specific words, and classifying the vehicles of Buddhist practitioners, he suddenly changes lanes.
He really does.
He tells the reader to take this exact article and use it to understand the Tao from Laozi's Tao Te Ching.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Shuem is making a bold, unifying philosophical claim across distinct cultures. He is stating that Buddha's Dharma, originating in ancient India, and the Tao, originating in ancient China, are the exact same mechanism.
But how do two completely different geographic and cultural philosophies arrive at the exact same conclusion about human consciousness?
Because both traditions diagnose the exact same bug in the human mind.
Our desperate reliance on language and categorization.
Exactly, our need to limit reality. The Tao, as described by Laozi, is the eternal, nameless force that flows through all things. The very first line of the Tao Te Ching explicitly states, "The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao."
The path that can be described in words is not the true path, which perfectly mirrors the Buddha's claim in the Diamond Sutra that the Dharma that can be spoken is not the true Dharma. Both Laozi and the Buddha independently created cognitive tools to break the mental boxes we build.
Right, both traditions point to a formless reality that cannot be contained in words. Suefeng notes that the Diamond Sutra is so infinitely deep that its capacity can't be exhausted in a lifetime.
Because the moment you think you have finally articulated its meaning, you have just created a new form that needs to be smashed.
It is a continuous, lifelong process of unlearning. True mastery, in both the Buddhist and Taoist sense, as Suefeng presents them, means developing a pure mind that dwells nowhere. Knowledge is absolutely vital. You must construct the raft across the river. But clinging to the forms of that knowledge is the primary obstacle to ultimate truth.
So what does this all mean for you? Because, well, most of us aren't monks debating ancient sutras, but this deep dive really challenges how you interact with any system of information. Whether it's a religious text, a corporate strategy, a scientific paradigm, or just a self-help methodology. Are you treating your knowledge as a rigid, inflexible law? Or are you treating it as a raft? A useful tool designed to get you to a higher level of understanding with the full intention of letting it go when it's no longer useful.
It requires a profound shift in how we value expertise. It asks us to respect the tools we use to learn, while simultaneously refusing to let those tools become a prison. The ultimate goal is not to hoard rafts on the beach, but to walk freely and unburdened on the other shore.
And that introduces a fascinating dilemma to leave you with today. If the highest form of learning eventually requires you to discard the very teachings that got you there, what is a raft in your own life right now? What rulebook or framework are you still stubbornly carrying around on your back long after it has already served its purpose?